King Xerxes ruled over a vast empire stretching from India to Ethiopia, with 127 provinces in total. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a massive feast for all his nobles, officials, and military leaders. For 180 days, he showed off the wealth and glory of his kingdom. Afterward, he held another feast for 7 days for everyone in the fortress of Susa, from the highest noble to the lowest servant. The king's wife, Queen Vashti, also gave a banquet for the women. On the 7th day of the feast, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded that Queen Vashti be brought before him wearing her royal crown so he could show off her beauty to the people. But Queen Vashti refused to come. The king was furious. His advisors warned that her refusal could encourage other women in the kingdom to disobey their husbands. They advised the king to remove her from her royal position and never allow her to appear before him again. A royal decree was sent throughout the empire declaring that every man should be ruler of his household. Some time passed, and the king began to miss Vashti. His attendants suggested gathering all the beautiful young virgins in the empire and bringing them to the palace. From among them, the king would choose a new queen. In the city of Susa lived a Jew named Mordecai, from the tribe of Benjamin. He had taken in his cousin Hadassah, also known as Esther, because she had no father or mother. Esther was lovely in form and face. When the king's order was announced, Esther was taken to the palace and placed under the care of Haggai, the keeper of the women. Esther found favor with him and received special care and beauty treatments. But she did not reveal her nationality, just as Mordecai had instructed her. Each young woman spent a full year receiving beauty treatments before going in to see the king. When Esther's turn came, she asked for nothing except what Haggai recommended. She pleased the king more than any of the other women. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen. He held a great banquet in her honor and gave generous gifts. During that time, Mordecai sat at the king's gate. One day he overheard 2 of the king's guards, Bigthana and Teresh, plotting to assassinate King Xerxes. Mordecai told Esther, who passed the information to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. The plot was investigated and found to be true, and the 2 men were hanged. The event was recorded in the king's chronicles. After this, King Xerxes promoted a man named Haman to the highest position among his officials. All the royal servants at the gate bowed down to Haman, but Mordecai refused to bow. When Haman found out that Mordecai was a Jew and would not honor him, he was enraged. He decided not only to punish Mordecai but to destroy all the Jews in the empire. He convinced the king that there was a group of people scattered throughout the provinces who followed different laws and did not obey the king. He offered to pay a large sum of silver into the royal treasury to have them destroyed. The king agreed and gave Haman his signet ring to carry out the plan. Letters were sent to every province in the empire ordering the destruction, killing, and annihilation of all Jews, young and old, men and women, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. The city of Susa was thrown into confusion. When Mordecai heard the news, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and mourned bitterly. In every province, there was great mourning among the Jews. Esther's maids and eunuchs told her what was happening. She was deeply troubled and sent clothes for Mordecai, but he refused them. She sent a trusted servant, Hathach, to find out what was wrong. Mordecai told Hathach everything and gave him a copy of the decree, asking him to show it to Esther and urge her to go before the king and plead for her people. Esther replied that anyone who approached the king without being summoned could be put to death unless the king held out his golden scepter. She had not been called to see the king for 30 days. Mordecai sent back this message: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house you alone will escape. If you remain silent, deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. Who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this?" Esther sent her reply: "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me for 3 days and nights. I and my maids will do the same. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish." On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace. When the king saw her, he was pleased and held out the golden scepter. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. The king asked what she wanted, even offering up to half the kingdom. Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, the king again asked what she desired. She invited them to another banquet the next day. Haman left the banquet joyful, but when he saw Mordecai at the gate not bowing, he was filled with rage. He went home and bragged to his wife and friends about his riches and status, but said none of it mattered as long as Mordecai was alive. His wife and friends advised him to build a gallows and ask the king to have Mordecai hanged. Haman was pleased and had the gallows built. That night, the king could not sleep. He had the book of records read to him and discovered that Mordecai had saved his life, yet had not been rewarded. The king asked who was in the court, and Haman had just entered to ask about hanging Mordecai. The king called him in and asked, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman, thinking the king meant him, said, put him in royal robes, on the king's horse, with a noble official leading him through the city proclaiming, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. The king said, go at once and do just as you said for Mordecai. Haman obeyed, humiliated. Later that day, he went to the second banquet with the king and Esther. The king asked again what Esther desired. Esther finally said, if I have found favor in your eyes, let my life and the lives of my people be spared. We have been sold to be destroyed. The king asked, who is this, and where is he? Esther said, the enemy is this vile Haman. The king rose in anger and went to the garden. Haman stayed to beg Esther for his life. When the king returned, he saw Haman falling on the couch where Esther was and said, will he even assault the queen in my presence? Immediately, Haman was seized. One of the eunuchs mentioned the gallows Haman had built. The king said, hang him on it, and Haman was hanged on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. The king gave Haman's estate to Esther, and Mordecai was brought before the king. Esther explained his relationship to her, and the king gave Mordecai the signet ring that had belonged to Haman. Esther again pleaded with the king to save her people. The king could not revoke the previous decree, but he allowed Mordecai and Esther to write a new one. They sent letters allowing the Jews to defend themselves against any attackers. On the 13th of Adar, the Jews triumphed over their enemies. In Susa alone, 500 men were killed, and later, Haman's 10 sons were hanged. The Jews celebrated their deliverance with joy and feasting. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews, declaring that they should celebrate annually on the 14th and 15th of Adar. This festival became known as Purim, named after the lots, that Haman had cast to decide the day of their destruction. Queen Esther confirmed this with a decree. Mordecai rose to power, becoming second only to King Xerxes, working for the good of his people and speaking peace to all his fellow Jews. Moral of the story of Esther teaches us that courage, faith, and wisdom can save lives and change the course of history. Even when God's name is not mentioned directly, he is always working behind the scenes. Esther risked her own life to save her people, showing that standing up for what is right may be dangerous, but it is necessary. It reminds us that we are all placed in certain positions or situations for a purpose, perhaps for such a time as this. Mordecai's trust in God's deliverance, even in the darkest times, teaches us to have faith when things look impossible. Haman's downfall also shows that pride, hatred, and plotting evil against others eventually lead to one's own destruction, while humility and righteousness are honored. Lastly, the celebration of Purim reminds us to remember and give thanks for the moments when hope, justice, and deliverance triumph over fear and oppression.